So I'm Katrina Jackson, CEO of Science and Technology Australia. My colleagues, as everyone knows, Brian Schmidt, Nobel laureate, Les Field is Secretary of Science Policy from the Australian Academy of Science. We're here today on behalf of the working scientists of Australia. As you'll know, a letter's gone today to the Prime Minister and to his Cabinet appealing, pleading with the government to do something about the fact that our research infrastructure is just about to collapse through what seems to be a series of missteps. I'll pass to my colleagues to go into detail here, but we are issuing a absolutely heartfelt plea to the current government to rethink what seems to be about to happen. There is a very substantial $2.5 billion investment in the future of this country at stake for what seems to be a logjam of funding for 1 year. There are thousands of scientists around the country. There is an enormous amount of incredibly important work being done that we're desperately concerned will be sacrificed to a political mess-up. Les, would you like to go next?
So thanks very much. We have delivered to the Prime Minister today and to the senior ministers of Cabinet and to the opposition a letter from the major research organisations in Australia. This includes the Academy of Science, the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, the Group of 8 universities, Universities Australia, the Medical Research Institutes and many more. Pretty much all of the major research organisations in the country. And what we are asking the Prime Minister to do is very much consider what is about to happen with our major research equipment and facilities. We talk about research infrastructure. What we really are talking about is big bits of equipment, all the way from microscopes, large microscopes, to telescopes, to offshore observation equipment, to facilities which allow us to make miniature machineries and miniature computer parts. These sorts of facilities we have invested more than $2 billion in over the last 10 years. So it's an issue which both sides of Parliament recognise as really important to Australia. We are coming to a situation where the support for this infrastructure will come to an end by the middle of this year. What that really means is that we have more or less a brick wall that we're about to hit. This means that we will start, we're already making plans to power some of these facilities down and look for alternative employment for some of the key staff that we've actually got operating these bits of equipment. Now, this sort of equipment really does underpin the fabric of much of the research which is actually done in Australia. It underpins the industries of the future. It is the development that will go into the sorts of industries which will make Australia great into the future. It is a real disappointment to me that this is being used as a pawn in a political game rather than being recognised as an essential part of what Australia needs to be in. If it was a road or a bridge or an airport, we recognise that as really fundamental infrastructure. We don't seem to be able to recognise the scientific equivalent of that and be able to plan for it long term.
Thank you, Les. So, in 2011, when I won the Nobel Prize, I was in this very courtyard, and my main message was the first thing Australia needs to do before it spends more money in science is to spend the money it's spending well. And I actually pointed towards the program that is at risk today as being an example of what we have done well. This program dates back to 2006 when the then Minister for Science, Julie Bishop, announced the INCRIS program, and it has been widely applauded in the time since. Now, the government, when it returned back to power in 2013, announced a very sensible strategy of funding this program for a year and having a long-term strategic plan, exactly what we need. But unfortunately, this program is being held hostage to the political state of the day, and so it has been tied to higher education reform. Higher education reform is a very important thing for this country to get right, and it's going to take some time. When I talk to crossbenchers, it's not going to happen in the next 2 weeks. But in the next 2 weeks is when we're going to start laying people off in the various facilities across the country. And so this needs to be decoupled. We need a solution, even if it's an interim solution, so that we can get higher education right and get our science infrastructure right. And the science infrastructure is not just universities. It's used in CSIRO, it's used by all the government agencies, and it's used by industry. It's used by companies like Cochlear to go through and make innovative products, to make Australia rich. Today, the intergenerational report has been released, and one of its key points is that Australia needs to increase productivity to ensure we have a prosperous future. Well, the facilities today that are at risk are the facilities that are going to deliver that productivity. And if they are closed down, it's not something we can just turn back on. It's like turning off a company for a year. If you turn off Telstra for a year, it comes back, but it's not the Telstra we know now. We turn these things off, we're going to have decimated their capabilities, and it's going to take decades and billions of dollars to build up the damage caused by the lack of release of this $150 million. Thank you.
Could you give some practical examples of the type of research that's at risk and the public benefit that might not flow through?
Sure. Would you like to, or would you like me to do it?
You can start, and I'll kick off after you.
Okay, so one of the things that I do is I'm a winemaker, and the Australian Wine Research Institute uses these facilities to improve Australia's competitiveness within the wine industry. One of my colleagues has used these facilities, developed a sensor that can go in and measure what is happening in individual barrels. So that is a little example. A bigger example is what is being done by the Integrated Marine Observation System. That goes out and has provided an unprecedented look at the oceans and the currents around Australia. That allows us to better predict the weather long term so that farmers can make informed decisions about how to maximize their profits by realizing what the weather is likely to look for like in the next 6 months. And that's just two examples. Les, I'm sure you have some more.
I think the Integrated Marine Observing Facility is a classic example of a great outcome, because knowing exactly where this El Nino, when the El Nino is coming, allows everybody to better plan for dry seasons and wet seasons. Look, another good example is the example we have of a new patch for delivering vaccines, which has come out of the nanofabrication facilities. These are the facilities I talked about for really making very small machines and very small components. This allows people to deliver vaccines and other pharmaceuticals without the need for an injection. So it's basically a patch which contains microfine needles. This is an Australian invention. It's something which is going to have a large impact across the world.
Liz, I should just add, keep in mind this is the brainchild of the Howard government. This is something that the Howard government and successive governments, as well as the rest of the country, should be really proud of. There are 27 facilities across the country. They run from improvements in agriculture to new production. There is a new production of a kind of steel being done in conjunction with industry. They can make the steel cheaper and greener. There is virtually no area of endeavour that these facilities don't touch. The nanopatch is revolutionary. It means you can deliver a vaccination with no refrigeration and no pain. That has enormous implications for both remote Australia and for the region. I mean, this is about health, it's about improving productivity, it's about ag. There's virtually nothing it doesn't touch. It's absolutely critical that it's continued, and it's something that should be a cause of national pride for all of us. So can we just get this right and find 1 year's worth of operational money to keep it going while it's reviewed and some long-term sources of funding are established?
What's the asking price?
$150 million was promised in the last budget. It takes about that much money each year. Keep in mind, this is a $2.5 billion capital investment over 2 years. What we're putting at risk here is $2.5 billion worth of capital investment for the sake of 1 year of operational funding. That seems a strange equation to me, and it seems a very strange equation to the scientists, and I think probably the people of Australia as well. This is very good work. Let's not put it at risk for a small amount of money for 1 year.
Can I just make one more comment?
Go ahead.
This is different. So in my 20 years in Australia, this is a different state of anything I've seen before. I've seen opportunities lost. I've seen Australia perform poorly. But what we're looking here is literally a calamity where we take everything we built up over a decade and we crush it. And I've never seen us get to that point in this country. It is something when I describe to my colleagues overseas who I'm trying to work with this infrastructure, they shake their heads and wonder. It is going to damage not just what we do internally, it's going to damage our ability to work internationally, and it is going to cause many people, I'm afraid, to go overseas. And one of the things that this country needs to address is how people like me work with industry. But when they shut down all the things that I work with, it doesn't make me a very good person to work with from an industry point of view. And so it's going to hurt industry as well.
So Brian touched on this question of, let's call it sustainability. The real question that we need to address, I think, is for bits of infrastructure, no matter whether it's physical infrastructure or research infrastructure, the real question is how you sustain this long term. The lifetime of the facilities that we're talking about is 10 to 20 years. It goes well beyond the term of any one government. So one really needs a mechanism by which you can sustainably support this infrastructure that you need going into the future. And look, to pick up on Brian's point about let's call it the research environment that Australia operates. We have some brilliant scientists, some brilliant researchers here in Australia who rely on the equipment that we have. Australia provides a healthy, good environment to do research, productive research. If we lose this infrastructure, we've already seen the tendency for people to either stay overseas and not return home, or either to be looking for job security and career security in terms of being able to do the things about which they're passionate overseas rather than in Australia.
As Les says, scientists all around the country are considering their position. You might want to ask Brian Schmidt about what he's thinking about his position.
So, among everything this affects, it does affect astronomy. I am the chair of something called Astronomy Australia Limited, set up as part of these facilities under the Howard era, and we manage Australia's national research infrastructure in astronomy. So things that we are funding right now include the 2 pathfinders for the Square Kilometre Array. They do not know how they're going to get all their money next year, and we don't have an answer for them as well. Right now, Australia is in very sensitive negotiations internationally about how we host the Square Kilometre Array, and at the same time, especially the Murchison Wide Field Array in Western Australia, which gets all of its operating expenses right now from this program, we're going to have to explain to those people why we should be hosting the Square Kilometre Array when we're not even prepared to pay the operating expenses of the pathfinders living up. Now, we're going to work to find a way forward, one way or another, but it's certainly going to be at a huge contraction of what we're doing now, and I do not know what the effect will be on the international scene, but it's not going to be zero.
Are you reconsidering here in Australia?
Well, I use telescopes, and the optical telescopes I use are also funded through this. Now, we have realized that there is uncertainty, and so we have hedged our future a few years in advance, but we are going to be making negotiations over the next year for the future. We cannot do that in the current climate. And so, absolutely, my ability to do astronomy, it's not a matter of me reconsidering my future, it's a matter of my future being handed to me, which is you cannot do cutting-edge astronomy. And that's what we are looking for with these types of cuts. It's just astronomy is 1 out of 27 disciplines. It's not just astronomy, it's everyone.